It takes a lot of credit to build trust with people. But when people trust you, that's when they'll truly follow you. Trust and care go hand in hand. So I look at vision as kind of like the strength component of leadership. Like people, you can paint a picture of the future and people believe that you can go there. The care and the consistency portion are where people are willing to follow you.
Hi, I'm Moshe Popak, and welcome to Common Denominator. Today, we speak with former Navy SEAL Garrett Unclebach. Garrett has taken the lessons he learned defending our country as a SEAL and now devotes his life to helping others find their purpose. We'll talk about his SEAL training, the moments that forever changed him, and how he spends each day paying his good fortune forward. His story is inspirational, powerful, and is sure to motivate you. Hi, Garrett, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hey, it's such an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with leadership. What would you say are the most important traits for great leaders today?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'll start with one of my favorite leadership quotes. I'm very much a student. I know I'm many people my age, there's lie of the self-made man. I can tell you I'm the opposite. I'm very much a product of my father. I'm very much a product of some other men who've spoken into me. So I love to start giving origination to some of my thoughts. My favorite quote on leadership is Eisenhower. Eisenhower said, leadership is getting people to do what you want, when you want them to do it, and they want to do it. And that's the hard part, is getting them to want to do it. And so I'll give three pillars really that I speak on, teach on a lot as it relates to leadership. Number one is vision. Vision is it's casting an image. It's telling a story. It's showing people where they can go. Organizationally, vision allows people to take their dreams and roll it into something bigger. Dreams can be about you, but vision is about the future. Vision is for an organization. I like to tell this story of there's some businesses that focus on building a castle, right? A castle, what's a castle do? It protects the king and the king's gold. And if you want to build a castle as an organization, you'll have to pay for every single brick that gets put into that wall because the castle's not for them. It's for the king. On the other side of that, the other side of building a castle is killing a dragon. And a dragon is something that dragons also want the gold. Dragons sit on the gold, but dragons, they hurt and destroy many people. And so when you start to talk about like, hey, I'm going after this dragon, and dragons are problems. Dragons are issues in the world. I'm going after this dragon. What'll happen is you'll find people who say, you know what? That dragon hurt me too. That dragon burned down my brother's farm. I'm coming with you. And it's not so much about gathering free labor, but it's about getting people joined into a common cause. And I experienced quite a bit of that in the military. We'll probably come back to that. So number one is vision. These are principles that build leadership. Number two is care. The things that you, as a leader, people, and it's Maya Angelou who said people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. When you care for people, think about if you were going to create a leader, whether this was your parent or whoever has been a leader in your life. If you were going to choose a leader, if you could like make them in a video game, wouldn't you pick someone who cared about you more than they cared about themselves? The same as if you go to a doctor. You go to the doctor and say, hey, doc, I've got a headache. And he's like, here, take this. You might be a little suspect to receive his prescription. But if you go to the doctor and he says, you tell him you have a headache, and he says, well, have you been eating some of these things? Have you experienced these symptoms? Does it come and it go? And he really begins to understand you. You'll receive his prescription a little bit better because you feel understood. The ability, careness and awareness go hand in hand. As a leader, the things that you care about are the things that you're aware about, right? When you have no awareness, it's very hard for you to care about people or care about things within your organization.
If someone doesn't care, can they learn to care? Like, in other words, you're put in this situation. Is it naturally, is it innate that you're, I guess, an empath, or that you care, or that you care about people's feelings and about ideas and things that you want to do? Or can you train that? Is that trainable?
I think it's absolutely learnable. I think it's a part of the maturity process. I think love is some of the greatest fruit that we can bear in life. And most trees do not bear fruit in their first and second year. They bear fruit as they grow and mature. And in the same as having children, right? When you have children, everything changes in your life. That's a form of bearing fruit. Yeah. When you have children, everything changes in your life. You realize life is not about me anymore. And if you're a good parent, you love your children. Many parents love their children to the point that they would die for their children to protect them. And that is a great form of love. And so, yeah, I would say that love can be learned. Love comes through maturity. Love comes through realizing that life is not about me, right? And care comes out of that. And as a business, you're right, as any form of organization, including a family unit's an organization, but a business is an organization. You're going to have that out of that vision. It's like, man, I care deeply about this problem. And then you have a level of awareness about that problem. I'm sure you've heard many pitches, just like I have. And you hear someone begin to talk about something that needs to change, a solution that needs to be brought into the world. They're aware of something that other people haven't seen, and that creates a level of care, right? And for me, one of my favorite things to talk about besides leadership is teamwork. And it's not so much, it's really interesting thought process in the military. People look at the military and they hear, no man left behind. And I actually tell people that's kind of a misunderstanding of the way the military works. In the SEAL teams, no man left behind is about someone who's died, right? But think about if I'm on a mission and I have a headache and I go, hey, chief, I have a headache. Can we turn around? That sounds a little foolish when it comes to a SEAL mission. The mission was more important than the mission was more important than I was. Wasn't about my headache. I was a part of something bigger than myself, but that created a love for the guys around me, right? It's different than with a family. I love the people that are in my family. That's who God gave me. But when it comes to a team, right? Like we're not here preferentially. We're here principally. We're serving something that's bigger than than either of us, right? It's not about the things that we like. It's not about I like you personally from a preference standpoint, but we're both after the same thing. So yes, care can be learned. And then I'll say the third principle of leadership is consistency, right? When you can do the same things over and over and over again, that's where people trust you. Whether it's in a marriage or in a business, no matter whatever your credit line is for trust, I see a lot of trust as $5 deposits. And, when you make a mistake, it's $1,000 and multi-$1,000 withdrawals. It takes a lot of credit to build trust with people. But when people trust you, that's when they'll truly follow you. Trust and care go hand in hand. So I look at vision as kind of like the strength component of leadership. Like you can paint a picture of the future and people believe that you can go there. The care and the consistency portion are where people are willing to follow you, right? Because if you're leading and nobody's following you, you're not really a leader, right? But if you can tell them where you're going to take them, they trust that you care about them and they see your strength, which shows up in the consistency as well, then they'll follow you.
I tell you, especially nowadays, to find people that are consistent, you talk about consistency, that is hard. We have more and more distractions as humans. That's right. You have literally psychologists. There was a guy that I met, and he owns this video game company, and he says he has a team of like 40 psychologists on his team. And I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but, and they specifically just figure out how, like you said, how can I manipulate humans to stay on and play this video game for a very long time?
Yeah.
Right. So distraction, right? Mastery of distraction, social media, TikTok, Instagram, all these things to find people. What is the way that people can learn to be consistent? Because then second point is that equals trust. And I said this before on the show, 50 years ago, people would trust 2 or 3 close friends. Nowadays, trust is eroding more and more and more, I think hand in hand with that consistency. So how, because I believe that will be the answer, part of the answer to help people raise their true potential. So how do we get people more and more consistent?
So consistency comes from a couple things. Number one, you've got to have a sense of urgency, right? It's one thing to be disciplined, and a lot of people think the answer to everything is discipline. I don't think so. People put me on a high pedestal of discipline being a Navy SEAL, but I explain discipline to people this way. You may think you have a discipline problem in your fitness. If I said to you, if you don't wake up at 4 a.m. tomorrow and run a marathon, something terrible is going to happen to your family. I bet you could do it, even if you haven't trained for it. You'd make it happen, right? And so for many people, it's not that so much that you have a discipline problem, you have a purpose problem. But on top of discipline, to have consistency, on top of discipline, you have to have this thing that we talked about often in the military, which is a sense of urgency, which is understanding it matters right now. If you want to be inconsistent in your life, say it'll matter tomorrow. But if you want to be consistent in your life, you have to look at every situation. SEAL training really screens for this. There's a type of individual that when the pressure is on, they perform at their highest, right? Because it really, and then a lot of what that comes out of is you're not performing for yourself, but because you perform out of a heart for, I know the mission needs something from me. And so there's a certain type of person that they'll perform their best when the pressure is on. The whole reason they want to perform is to love and serve other people. Yeah. And so a sense of urgency is really what develops great consistency, where you say, today is what matters most. I need to show character in my family today. I need to lead people well. I need to be disciplined. I need to wake up on time because today matters. And where this comes from, really in my own life, I'll just give a personal example, a practical example. One of my favorite movies as a kid was the movie Sandlot. Did you ever see this movie?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people just see that movie as a fantastic kids movie, coming of age tale. And that's great. It certainly is. But when I look at that movie, I look at the end of the movie. And if you haven't seen Sandlot at this point, I'm going to ruin it for you. And it's not my fault because the movie's 30 something years old. But the final scene of the movie is Benny the Jet, the main character in the movie, and he's in a rundown, right? This is a pickle in baseball, right? He's stuck in between. He's trying to steal home plate. And what you realize, because it's at the end of the movie, is he spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Right. If you look backwards at the movie through the lens of the final scene where Benny the Jet steals home, you realize he's been preparing for the rundown his entire life. His young childhood is a moment of preparation. It's a season of greatness in his life, which culminates in him, getting the ball back, running from the dog, which turns into him stealing home in baseball. What I believe in my own life, and I believe this is true for so many people, that there is a great plan for your life. And what I don't want to do is get to the moment. I don't believe I've faced that moment yet, but I don't want to come to this moment. I don't want to come to my rundown and show up unprepared. Benny the Jet knew as a kid that he was destined for greatness. And if you feel like there's a calling on your life, if you feel like there's greatness in front of you, it'll make you realize I have to make the most of today. Because combat, and it's a battlefield perspective, but I think battlefield is a great understanding for life. One of my favorite authors, John Eldridge, he says, until you see your life in the context of war, you'll misinterpret 90% of what happens to you. Combat is not won in the moment. Combat is won through preparation, right? Owning a gun does not mean that you know how to use a gun. Owning a gun does not mean it's sighted in. I spent tens of thousands of rounds on the range at the 3-yard line trying to put the bullet through the exact same hole every single time, where I'd shot 100 rounds and it looked like I shot one. And if you can do that when it's time to be on the battlefield, you'll perform in your moment. And so I say all of that around urgency, which is what leads to consistency. You've got to decide for yourself, today matters most. And it's actually something your listeners can't see it, but if you'll see this, Moshe, is one of the things that I say to my listeners all the time is today matters. Yeah. Right. It's something that matters a lot to me.
I think that for me, and I talk to my kids a lot about that. We talk about purpose. I think a good tool that I felt is you realize what's the reality. From the time you're born, there's going to be a day that you're going to leave, but even before you leave, your energy level, how much energy you have, and it's okay. So have a plan, a 40-year plan, and one day you won't be here anymore, right? So if you go from that place, what also happens if it's something above yourself? And we talked a little bit about before the show about this, and I've been grappling with this because my greatest challenge, and I think it's a lot of people, is inaction because they're associating, because there's some sort of fear. And I'm sure as a Navy SEAL, you've done tremendous work with fear, because you can have in the battlefield, in the enemy line, I'm dealing with it, I'm a lay person, but it's the first time that I had to have, I guess they call it ego death together with, together with fear. And I separated that. I surrendered all of that. And it's the first time that I'm seeing fear. It's just my negative association all these years. And now it's really the other word, possibility.
Absolutely.
Excitement.
And that's, I'll tell you one of the things that's had a big influence on my life. Well, before I go there, let me add one other thing to consistency is what goes with urgency is intentionality. Intentionality is having intention, right? And you can break down these words that you need to be intention. Tension is being pulled towards something, right? Being unintentional is you're just drifting through life. And if you're a fan of Napoleon Hill, he talks about how that is the killer of so many people is the drift, right? But you've got to be intention. I'm going in a certain direction. And if you're intentional, means you know what you want. When I coach men, one of the places I start with them says, hey, what do you want? If you cannot answer that question of what do you want, I can't take you anywhere. But once you know what we want, then we can go on a journey. You've got to get intentional, which is you deciding, hey, here's what matters most for me in my life. And that's really two things. It's values and priorities. You hear people talk a lot about values, and values are terrific. I think there's a difference between values in a person and values in a business. A lot of people will talk about integrity as a core value. You should have integrity. I don't list it as a core value. Enron had integrity listed as a core value. So it's not so much about what you say, but it's what you live. Values are the things that you value. And then there's also priorities that go along with that. And let me just speak on this. Priorities as it relates to intention, as it relates to consistency, and then we'll go on to purpose. Priorities are different than goals, right? And on a mission, we have things we'd like to accomplish, but then we have priorities, and these are the things that I will never let this happen. One of the number one priorities on a mission is, it sounds silly, but it's critical. Don't shoot your teammates. It's not the goal of the mission isn't to not shoot your teammates. It's not the goal, but the highest priority is don't shoot your teammates. Right. I have a lot of goals in business. I'll tell you, there's some areas where I don't have goals, but they're my highest priorities. I don't have goals in my marriage. I don't have goals right now in my relationship with God. These are two areas that are incredibly important to me. I don't have goals there, but that's because they're my highest priorities. My number one priority in my life is my relationship with God. And right after that is my relationship with my wife. Right. And what my priorities are the things I'm least willing to fail at. I would rather die than fail at this thing. The same on a battlefield. I'd rather die than shoot one of my teammates, right? And so when you understand what priorities are, these are the things I'll never fail at. The philosophy of my life is I'm going to win in those areas. I'm going to win in my relationship with God. I'm going to win in my relationship with my wife. And everything I have after that, I'm going to give into pouring into others, into succeeding in business. I'll give that effort to those goals, but only after I have secured these key priorities. Right. And so when you have priorities, then you can have intention. But what most people do, and where most men get off track, is they take every tailwind. Right. If you want to get off track in your life, have a tailwind. Oh, I could go really fast in this direction. I could accomplish so much so fast in this direction, and you'll end up in a place that you never wanted to be.
Yeah. I think of myself, and I tell people, you talk about tailwinds, that I am the turtle, and I'm proud of that. Right. Yeah. That's what it is. It's years and years and years of preparation. And there's moments, and when those moments happen, there have been a few, and they're most surreal. I had, people that turned me down. I had a big event in my house, and this was just one example. And there's this long line of all these people that didn't give me a chance, but they're in my house taking pictures.
What a great story.
Yeah, with this fellow. But I know you also have, tell us about the mindset mastery program that you run, because
okay, so
is that only for men, or is it men and women?
It's for men and women. So mindset mastery, I have our podcast called The Impossible Life. Just like you do, I'm sure a lot of people reach out to you for coffee or things like that. And I care deeply for people, but I also learned that kindness is a silent killer. And so I'm going to give to people and serve to people as much as I can. But if I just say yes to everyone out of kindness, then I'm actually going to get away from I'll miss my moment, so to speak, like we talked about. And so I originally started the podcast out of people saying, "Hey, I'd love to have coffee with you. I want to hear more of what you said. Can we have lunch?" And unfortunately, I have to say no more than I would like to. And I created the podcast as my gift to people. It's like, I want to tell you about that. And so often people will come up to me after a talk or something and say, "Can you tell me more about that?" And I'll say, "Hey, that's episode 127, right? I just talked about that. And if you go back to the early years, we talked about it in year one as well." Right. And so that was my gift there. But then out of the podcast, podcast has been a phenomenal opportunity. You've probably experienced the same thing, where I did it for that reason, but then I realized it was a great opportunity for me to expand and develop some of my way of thinking. I like to explore my thoughts through podcasts more than I like to write it, even though I do write. What Mindset Mastery is kind of like a deeper college version of the podcast. Like this month, we're talking about focus, and I look at, we have 12 different topics in Mindset Mastery. We talk about a different one each month. This month is about focus. And in focus, I talk about the light, the lens, and the objective. I break it down from a scientific, practical standpoint. Like, here's the truth that we can see universally. Here's what we can observe. And here's how this affects our mindset. Here's how this affects our psychology. It's actually a great tool. If you're a coach or a speaker, I encourage, and there's plenty in the organization, hey, come in, rob my content, go and share it with your people. Because something I've learned as a speaker is people care more to learn from a specific person than they do about your content. You can have a great amount of content. There's people who want to learn from me because of my background, and there's other people who don't want to learn from me because of my background. So I love to share my way of thinking. That's what Mindset Mastery is. There's 12 different topics. Number 1 is identity. 2 is purpose, awareness, self-leadership, discipline, motivation, principles, perspective. Perspective is my superpower, one of my favorite things. Alignments, fear and pain, focus, and time management. So we talk about one of those topics every single month, and all the content's in there for people to access at any time. And we meet twice a month. It's actually what I have to jump to right after this is I have one of our monthly calls with those people. So,
oh no, I love that. I say the same thing, with our podcast. And what did I see about humanity? And I've mentioned this a number of times in the show. Common denominator. Humans, we're so divided. How do we, that's the purpose. How do we get people to talk about the things? Because we have so many more things that we have in common instead of the things that divide us. We've done probably almost 200 episodes, and people like yourself, elite sports players, military, business people, and everybody's always the same. It's just a matter of exactly what you're saying. Every day, doing the work that they put down. My son was just asking me, 16. I said, take pen to paper and begin.
Yes.
But do what you wrote down on your paper. Do it. He asked me, am I doing enough? Of course you're doing enough. The fact that you're aware of that, right? Awareness, right? It's tremendous,
It always costs you more than you want it to. You've gone further in real estate than I have. It costs you more than you wanted it to cost you. It takes longer than you wanted it to take you. But through intention, through consistency, you'll get to where you want to go. It just always takes a little bit longer than you wanted it to take. There's a lot of false. I don't know if you ever climbed any mountains, but when you climb a mountain, there's a lot of false peaks, and you're like, oh, that's the top. And then you get there and you realize there's more. And there's a great proverb that says at the top of mountains, you find more mountains. And I'm sure you've seen the same in your own success, that you're like, oh, it's just right there. I've only got a few more steps. And you get there and you realize, no, I've got to keep going, and I've got to keep going.
Yeah. I think always to reflect on not the end goal. It's the becoming. It's what changed in your DNA, actually, what changes in that DNA. And I want to talk for a second about the training, right? You're a Navy SEAL. It's, one in very few. What was the training like?
Well, there's a fantastic Discovery Channel documentary called Bud's Class 234. Even if you have zero interest in joining the military, it's a great watch. Discovery Channel documentary. I tell people everything that's in there is true. It's just not everything. There's some things that they withheld from the documentary. It's for a reason known as the most difficult military training in the world. It takes in my class there were many. There was a few Olympic athletes. 25% of my class was NCAA athletes. take the most, athletic person, and they could make it through one day of SEAL training. But here's where people quit. And this is, people always ask me, hey, what's the secret? Here's where people quit. Take the best athlete, he could make it through a day of SEAL training. But when you finish at 10:30 at night and the instructors, leave you, they go home, but then they leave you with a bunch of work to do. Hey, here's what you got to get done before tomorrow. And so you finish that stuff by about 12:30 at night. And then the class officer, who's a student in the program with you, says, okay, we need to meet back here at this time, finally dismisses you. You go start cleaning up your own personal gear, right? You take care of the team before you take care of yourself. You go start cleaning up your team your personal gear. And then you finally finish that, and it's 1:00 in the morning. And the student officer said, hey, meet back here at 3:30. And so it's 1:00 at night, and you realize you got to be back at 3:30. And so you're going to go get 2.5 hours of sleep. And it was the toughest day you've ever been through. And you realize you're about to go through it again tomorrow. Here's why people quit. They say, I can't do this for 179 more days. And one of the great lessons of difficult things is being able to speak to yourself. You and I were talking about that briefly, is being able to speak to yourself. And what you have to say is, I don't have to do this for forever, but I have to do it for right now. And you've learned this through your own grit. You have to learn to be in the moment. And this is the power of perspective, knowing when to zoom in and when to zoom out. When you're in the middle of deep pain in your life, if you zoom in on that, the pain will get worse. If you'll zoom out on pain, you'll see purpose, right? You'll see where it's come from, where it's taking you to. And there's other times where you really zoomed out and you got to zoom in. I'm naturally a zoomed out person, but when I'm at my daughter's birthday, I need to zoom in for the moment. I need to not say, hey, you know what, 10 years from now, this won't matter. When I'm at my daughter's birthday, I got to zoom in, right? And so it's just learning how to use these different lenses. So SEAL training is one of the most difficult programs in the world. It screens for a specific type of person who's not the greatest athlete, but someone who has self-control, someone who is willing to give all that they have. The hardest part of SEAL training is called Hell Week. You start on Sunday night and you go until Friday afternoon. You'll sleep 1 hour on Wednesday afternoon and 1 hour on Thursday afternoon. And the only reason they brought that into the program is because they realized it started causing brain damage. So from Sunday night until Friday, you'll get 2 hours of sleep. You'll run over 200 miles. The majority of that is with an inflatable Zodiac, a boat on your head that weighs over 200 pounds. That's if you get all the sand and water out of it. But when you start getting sand and water in there, it weighs a lot more. You'll share that load with 6 other guys. And the majority of those 200 miles you run is with a boat on your head. And what it feels like to run with a boat on your head is, just imagine, for the younger audience, they won't catch this reference, but for those who are older, a phone book. If I ran behind you with a phone book or a dictionary and I'm just banging you on the top of the head with that dictionary or phone book while you're running, that's what it feels like to run with a boat on your head, because it's inflatable. So the weight is just continually bouncing up and down. So I could go on, but if you want to hear a lot, or if you want to see more of SEAL training, I would encourage you to watch the Bloods Class 234 Discovery Channel documentary.
So I trained jiu-jitsu for 13 years and I'm, training now for my black belt. And all this time you talk about the training in the trenches, and it's literally the thing that I think that I got is that the ability to pause and, and think. I think that if you can, and then coupled with the fact that probably at a certain point, you're so used to the pain that eventually, right, you're able to zoom out, and maybe it becomes something else. Your brain starts telling you, hey, maybe this is not so bad. Is that actually what ends up probably happening? I would think.
No, that's accurate. I had a fantastic leader in the military who said something, and it was just burned into my brain when he said it. He said, never rush to your death. And you're talking about the pause. One of the things that they would teach us is often when we're clearing targets, and this is one of the most important things that SEALs do, just imagine, like you've seen in the movies, either if you've seen a Navy SEAL movie or seen SWAT teams clearing through a target, it's very dangerous. And it's really where the greatness of the SEAL teams is, where you can send 4 men into a room and there's people in there with machine guns who want to kill you, and they know you're coming in, and you come into the room and they still can't stop you. It's one of the most important things that we do. But they would say never rush to your death, because speed gives a great advantage there, but you have to move only at the speed that you can control.
I really love that. And Garrett, this has been tremendous. Thank you. It's always great, talking and meeting like-minded people, and because, like attracts like, and hopefully, We try one by one to make a difference in the world. How can people learn more about you or follow you on social? Or
the best place to find me is you can find me on Instagram, where it's we take a lot of podcast clips, speaking clips, all of that, and I put them on there. I don't post a ton of personal stuff. I try to use it as much as I can to share messages with people. So you can find me on Instagram at Garrett Unclebach. You can find our podcast, The Impossible Life, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those places. And you can go to our website, theimpossible.life, and that's where you'll see any of the other programs that we have. You'll find my page if you want to reach out to me about coaching. So those are all the best places to find me.
Thank you so much, Garrett. It's really been great. Thank you.
Oh, honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Likewise. Blessings. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Garrett. Thanks as always for spending time with us. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'd be grateful for a like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, feel free to leave a rating and review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.